Truthseekers is a viewer-supported show. Wonderful people like you who enjoy this show send pledges in the form of super chats, super stickers, super thanks, PayPal or Cash App. Instructions for how to help are in the description. You can also join our Patreon, and for as little as $1 a month you can get extra content. Patreon supporters get a backstage pass, early access to all our production videos before they are distributed publicly, Stephen Campbell's music, private writings, a monthly show journal, and more. You can also become a YouTube channel member for $5 a month. A YouTube membership includes all of the Patreon benefits, plus a special members badge, priority reply to video comments, and the live chat, plus a monthly members only video. We thank you all, kind and generous benefactors, for supporting Truthseekers. Thank you for your generosity and support. Truthseekers is a viewer-supported show. Now there's a great way to support these broadcasts and show your support. Please be sure and check out our merchandise store. Links to our 2 merchandise online stores are in the links to this video or podcast. The Amazon storefront ships super quickly in the United States, Great Britain, and in many more places. Amazon may not ship to your country or location. If that's the case, hit our second merchandise link in the description and visit our Redbubble storefront. Merchandise from our Redbubble storefront ships worldwide, but may take longer than Amazon. We've got a great deal of super high quality merchandise for you to choose from, including t-shirts, phone cases, sweatshirts, and even pillows. The feedback from our products have been overwhelmingly great. Quality products and fast shipping. People all over the world are buying some merchandise and showing their support of the show. Praise the cash! Praise the cash! Praise the cash! We thank you all, kind and generous benefactors who are buying some merchandise and helping us to continue this journey. Thanks for being here. This is Truthseekers with your host, Stephen Campbell. Please rate, like and comment on our videos or podcasts. If you are listening to an audio podcast, please rate us 5 stars to help us rise in the search rankings. If you are watching on YouTube, please like, comment and subscribe to our channel. If you're listening to an audio podcast, we love and appreciate you listeners, but you are missing the live tapings. All our shows are recorded live with video feed. We'd love you to come be a part of our live broadcasts and tapings for the podcast. Head on over to YouTube, click the search tool, the little magnifying glass, put Truthseekers, one word in the search bar, and hit enter. You'll see a strange and mysterious guy with sunglasses. That means you found the channel. Go there, smash the subscribe button and hit the notification bell to receive up-to-date info on our YouTube channel. We welcome you to be a part of our live taping and our chat room during the live broadcasts. Seek the truth. Speak the truth. This is Truthseekers. Truthseekers.
Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to Truthseekers. I'm so happy tonight because tonight I'm going to get to interview someone that I've gotten to know a little bit. And it's interesting, these rabbit holes that we go down. But some time ago, I began to hear rumblings of this person who does some things that I think are a little strange, like conduct interviews and keep them private. But he makes transcripts and different things. He's really out trying to find the truth behind some of these stories. And, so I began hearing about him, and we had him on as a panel guest not long ago. And I can't tell you how many messages I got of people saying, you got to get that guy to do a whole show, which I agree with 100%. One of the things that I like about this show is that it gives me a passport to talk to some very knowledgeable people, researchers, authors, lecturers about these strange and interesting subjects. I could have talked to him offline, but I decided it would probably be best if he and I just have this conversation and let others benefit from it as well. So without any more fluff, let's get into it, friends. And I'm going to bring our guests here, Victor Coleiro. There you go. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Love the accent. By the way, all the way from Australia, and it is like a whole different day. So we're like time traveling here. Because I'm here on Tuesday, you're here on Wednesday. He sent me something about the time difference, and he's like, yeah, we'll do it. You're this time for you on Tuesday, and this time for me on Wednesday. It's kind of...
it's 11 in the morning on Wednesday.
Yeah, and we're 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here, which is just bizarre and odd. I don't even know where to begin. We have so much to get to, but I do have a big list of questions. I want to know about these things I've been hearing about these interviews that you do, but then you don't really make them public, many of them. What is the...
You can hear some of them.
Okay.
I did one with Mike Rogers. I can send a link to that if anyone's interested. It's pretty boring.
But why is it, what is the thinking behind doing some interviews and keeping them private and not releasing them? Is it just personal, your personal, questions and things?
No, they'll come out. I'm going to release them. Like, I don't have all that many interviews. I've done one with Mike Rogers. I've done one with Fred Dunham. He's the Area 51 security guard that was there during Bob's time. I've done one with Glenn Campbell.
Okay.
And I've done one with a guy Bob worked with at Fairchild.
Okay.
I have to edit the one with Fairchild because the guy was constantly bad-mouthing Bob's Bob's first wife, Carol, because she also worked with, I don't know if many people know this, but Bob's first wife, Carol, worked with Bob at Fairchild. They were both technicians there, and there's a 13-year age gap, and this guy worked there. He knew Bob, he knew Carol. He didn't say very pleasant things about Carol, not personality-wise, but he got into physical things, and I don't want to put out the interview because of that, because I just didn't agree with some of that stuff.
Yeah, I know. I've been there. Yeah, I've been there. And unfortunately, we're live, so I don't get an edit button. There's been a few interviews that I went, wow, that went off the rails, but it's out there, and Yeah, so you and I have a particular interest in several cases, one of them being the Bob Lazar case. And you've got a great deal of information that I'm going to try to pry from you that nobody's ever heard before, right? You just dropped one nugget that Bob and his wife were both technicians at Fairchild. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, basically, as you guys know, Bob went to Pierce College. And just to give you a lowdown of what this guy told me before I edit it and put it out there. Look, to be honest, I'm lazy. I should have edited it a long time ago and put it out.
I've been there too, brother. Yeah, sometimes you get busy, and this thing is not high on priorities, right?
Yeah, and look, Glenn Campbell, when I did the interview with Glenn Campbell, he told me, I want a copy of this. But again, same situation. There's bits in there that I have to edit out. And I haven't done it yet. And I've just been waiting for this email from Glenn saying, hey, what the hell? You probably should send it to me. So I've still got to get onto that as well. But yeah, in terms of Bob went to Pierce College, did electronics, as everyone probably knows from Stanton Friedman. He's the one who said that. He was working at Fairchild Zincom. Now, if you look at Bob's marriage certificate in 1980, when he married Carol, his first wife, they're both listed as electronics technicians and electronics engineer, I think.
Yes, interesting. And in the highest grade complete, it says 12, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's 1980. And then he was still working and I believe he was working at Fairchild back then. And he kept working at Fairchild until 81, like just a year before he started at Westall National Laboratory. Just call it Lanel. I can't say the whole name.
Yeah, me too. I say Lanel. Yeah. And it's interesting, you have sources that kind of confirm that Bob was an electronics technician at Lanel, and I have sources that work there now, still to this day, who told me, yeah he worked on radiation health monitors. He
worked in, well, when Stanton Friedman died, he had a treasure trove of stuff that started to that only trickled out because apparently I rang up I emailed the Canadian archive that's archiving all his stuff, and they told me that it's going to take 10 years to archive his stuff because he had just like 10 van loads of boxes, and each box was just a random grab of paperwork he just threw into a box. It could be like a paperwork from 1950 case mixed in there with something from 2001.
Yeah, and interestingly, that archive was actually at a college about an hour from me, and Grant Cameron went to it. And then the college, they decided after receiving this volume of this stuff that they were neither qualified nor financially able to house that archive. That was his wish that it went there. So somehow it ends up in another place in Canada now, which is going to make it a lot harder for US researchers, I guess, to get over there, let alone Australian ones. But yeah, Grant Cameron told me that there was so much stuff, all he could do was look through it, quickly scan the pages, try to find good stuff, and then he would scan the stuff that he found. He was there for 2 days and only came out with a bunch of interesting stuff, but he was kind of upset that he didn't have more time to go through it. There's just so much material. Stanton is an older guy, so he was everything was on a piece of paper. Everything.
Yeah. It was actually Grant Cameron that I saw the stuff from. Like he posted a full-page copy of Stanton Friedman had of the Lanel phone directory page, which Bob was on. If you might note that every time George Knapp shows it, or you'll see a snippet of it, it's always a zoomed-in image of, and usually blurry, of just Bob's name and the phone number, or if you're lucky, you might see the KM next to it. That's it. But if you get the full page, it actually has a lot more detail. It has the building he worked in, the room number he worked in, so on. It's got more.
Yeah, and this is interesting because obviously a senior staff level physicist and a low level electronics technician would not work in the same room, you know?
Yeah, and Joe, Bob worked in building 2, and so did Joe Veninetti, because I also got a copy of a 1980 version of, which is somewhere. I'll find it later.
No, it's quite all right. Yeah.
There's I did manage to get a 1980, like an earlier copy of the Lanel directory. Bob wasn't in the 1981, but the 1981 did have Joe Veninetti, and he was in the same room as Bob, same building as Bob. And as we know, Joe Veninetti was a technician. So I looked up the building number. There's a particular sequence that they denote. Bob worked in technical area 53, which is the meson physics area, or whatever it's called, and in building 2. And I looked up building 2, and it's a bit difficult, but I eventually found a document that highlighted what was in building 2. And what was in building 2 probably not the only thing, but in building 2, there was the equipment test laboratory where the contractors worked and technicians worked. So,
yeah, you know what gets me is that there are people that just want to believe Bob so much that they just go, no, he was a scientist there. And, you know, I guess maybe I just gotten too deep into this case. And so have you, because Bob says, don't worry about the minutia, worry about the meat of what I'm saying, that, you know, I worked on these alien flying saucers. People get lost in this minutia. But when you do get lost in the minutia, you keep finding ample and supportive evidence that he was never a real scientist. He was a low-level technician. You know, he was like one step above a guy that works at Radio Shack. I know because I worked at Radio Shack. You know, you got a lot of guys that are just techies that like science and technology that work at Radio Shack. He was that kind of a guy, not a senior staff level physicist. That's a whole nother level. You know.
Yeah, the guy I spoke to it. Who worked at Fairchild said Bob was still doing night courses at Pierce College when he was at Fairchild, and that was in 1981.
At the same time, he was supposed to be going to MIT. You know,
yeah. He's still got friends because there was actually 3 contacts I had for Fairchild. One spoke to me, one I emailed, and he just said, "Yeah, I knew he was there, but I don't know much about him. Didn't really talk to him." And the other one was Bob's, must have been a very good friend of Bob, because this guy said, I'm not going to talk to you because I'm still friends with Bob.
That's interesting. Yeah, he didn't want to give you any dirt, I suppose, then. As is, you know, I can imagine if you're still friendly with the guy, you don't want to trash talk him or, you know, say that his story is faked or partially faked. Yeah, so you've come across... You're coming across all this evidence that he was just a technician, and it just boggles my mind that people don't care about this evidence. And I always say this, Victor, the hallmark of a good researcher is that you could give me those contacts and I could call and get the same results. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have good, real, on the record, these are sources that are knowledgeable about these things, but people still put their blinders on and they don't want to hear this. It's like you're ruining a fairy tale. It's like you're telling them that Santa Claus isn't real. You know what I mean? When you're a kid and some of the kids don't want to hear it. They're like, no.
It's believe without question. But look, I should say that a lot of the you know the groundwork information that I started with came from past researchers. You know, Dan Burnkert, alien scientist Jeremy, Tom Mayhood, Glenn Campbell. In fact, Tom Mayhood is the one who told me about the Fairchild guy. He was the one who pointed me to him.
Interesting. So there again, there's another person that found this information, and then he said, "Hey, here's my contact," and you got the same answers. You know, like I said, this is good research because other people can go after you and verify that what you're saying is factually accurate.
But Tom Mayhood's an interesting one. You say holding back information. Tom Mayhood spoke to Bob's second wife, Tracy, on the phone, which I never knew until I chatted with him. He told me that back in the day he spoke to Tracy, who was Bob's second wife, who was with Bob at the time. You know, the whole
story broke.
Whole sorts of stuff was happening, and he told her that it was all bullshit. That she was afraid to come out and tell her story because of Bob's friends. And when he told me that, I thought, well, she means Gene Huff. I'm just assuming, but if anyone has looked into Bob and seen the posts by Gene Huff, you'll know what I mean.
Yeah, he's a bit of a bully.
The work, basically.
And it's interesting that for those that don't know, Bob actually married his second wife while he was still married to his first wife, and then his first wife committed suicide, which is very tragic. So we can't talk to her. And I know there's another show host. There's another show host that I know who got to speak to this Tracy, but so far, but he hasn't really publicized the contents of their conversation. But it went something like the conversation you just described. She claimed that he made the entire thing up to make money with his friends.
Yeah. Well, all he told me was that he spoke to Tracy over the phone. This is back in the day. This is Tom Mayhood, and that she told him it wasn't true, She was afraid to come out and tell her story because of Bob's friends. I don't know who that is. I just assume might have been Jean. And that when he took her to see the lights, you know, when they did the test flight and he took them all out into the desert to see the flight, she told Tom Mayhood that all she saw was a light in the sky and it was completely unimpressed.
Yeah, and a lot of people have suggested, as much as I don't like him, Sean David Morton kind of proved that if you're near that area where they supposedly viewed these test sites, you're going to see lights in the sky because there's Janet Airlines flying into Area 51 every hour on the hour, just about. So people make this big deal about how did he know about these test flights if he didn't work there? Well, it's just a light in the sky. There's a video of it that's completely unimpressive, and people have suggested that they, you know, like they moved the camera to make it look like the light went over, and it's completely unimpressive. And I think, near as I remember, they were either 50 or 60 miles away from Area 51, which, you know, you're not going to see any detail of a craft flying over Area 51 from 50 miles away. And I've always assumed that, yeah, that could be anything. It could be a helicopter off in the distance. It could be airplane lights, FAA lights, Janet Airlines trucking people in and out of Area 51, right?
Yes, Glenn Campbell wrote a Area 51 viewer's guide back then, and it's 115 pages. So it should give you a clue. There was a lot going on. It's a test base for for aircraft. They used to fly their aircraft sometimes at night, a lot of times at night. They would drop flares from little parachutes and balloons.
Yeah, all kinds of tests that could be misconstrued.
Yeah, and then you had the Janet flights coming in on like clockwork, literally, because they're on a schedule. Some of them came in at night, and the landing light would shine directly at where Bob took people just before it. So you'd see the headlights shine right at you until it turned to land at Area 51, you know, come down below the range. So yeah, I mean, you know, people say, how did he know there was going to be lights there? Well, there was lights there every night.
Yeah, especially if it's just lights in the sky. Now, if they had a real, you know, if they had a real great quality video of something that looked like a flying saucer, great. But if it's just a light in the sky, you know, it literally could be anything. It could be test flights. It could be early drones. It could be the Janet flights. It could be anything. So it just don't, I don't put a lot of, you know, people use that all the time. Like, well, he had to work there because he showed the people the test flights. And then you get to the meat of what they actually saw, and you could see a video of it. It's literally a light in the sky, nothing impressive, nothing to suggest it's anything, you know, alien or exotic for sure.
Yeah. No, nothing was going on, but yeah, well, you know, nothing alien.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, you know, I don't even know where to start with Bob. I mean, you know, you got a letter there's a letter from Bob that he sent to Lannell asking, oh, you know, where's my employment records? And Lannell sent a letter back saying, well, you know, you sent us a copy of the Lannell phone directory and it clearly says Kirk Meyer next to it. Why don't you ask Kirk Meyer?
Yeah. And that's another point that people miss.
And your security
number. Yeah, that's another point. That's another.
Why are you asking us?
Absolutely, and that's a point that people miss, is that he didn't actually work for the lab proper. He worked as a subcontractor through Kirk Meyer, who, by the way, never hired scientists, especially not senior staff level scientists. All they hired was low-level technicians and IT help desk kind of people that, you know, maintained electronic systems and computer systems for the higher ups. These scientists, they don't have time to mess around with a computer network or with health monitors or badge, lock systems, you know, where you swipe your card through. They have technicians to do that for them. And that is what Bob Lazar was. And that's why he may have had some familiarity with the base. There's another interview where somebody showed him like a satellite dish at Lannell, and he goes, oh yeah, I remember putting that in. Go ask any lab whether a senior staff level physicist would be installing a satellite dish. There's no way on earth. They don't do that kind of thing. They have techs to do that.
Right. So, yeah. He tells Jeremy Corbell that in a video that he went out in 1982 to install a satellite dish in Lannell. But see, that's the point. You know, people are so entrenched in the story that like that doesn't even click with them. You know, it's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. This is the minutia that Bob Lazar doesn't want you to worry about. You know,
like,
and he never. You know, one of the things that bothers me about him is that he never will give an interview to somebody like you or me that has some of this information and will point blank ask him to explain it away because he can't. And I've heard various reports that he refuses to give interviews unless he's given the questions in advance and you don't deviate from the script. And really, the only people that he gives interviews to is George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell. And I guess Rogan, once, you know, that negotiated what we're going to talk about. Like, you know, in other words, he only will agree to softball interviews. He's never had one hard interview that I've ever seen in 35 years. Not one.
Yeah. He's probably gone back into hiding.
Well, I think I heard from several different people that he bought like $1 million property after he got the book deal with Tom DeLonge, which, by the way, nobody was supposed to know that Tom DeLonge gave him the book deal. Tom DeLonge's sister registered the .com, and that's how they got caught as the publisher. Like, she registered the .com for the publishing company that was publishing Bob Lazar's book. And also, even people very close to him, like John Lear, said this wasn't written by Bob Lazar. This was ghost written because all the details are wrong. So that's interesting.
I can't imagine Bob writing a book, so I'm pretty sure he did have a ghostwriter. I don't think his property that he bought in I almost gave away where he lived, but
yeah, please.
But he lives in a new place. But I've seen the real estate listing, the old real estate listing. It wasn't $1 million. It's a lot more modest than that.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Maybe I heard wrong. It's definitely $500,000, I would say, because I've seen like satellite images somebody sent me, and it's got like a big house and barn and outbuildings and some kind of other stuff. Right. So probably $500,000, maybe.
It's a country home. It's you know, they've got horses, I think, as well, and they've got stable. But yeah, it's somewhere around the half, maybe a little less. I can't remember.
Well, the book deal must have paid pretty good then, because there's been other sources that told me that he was at one point about to lose his other house. I don't know if that's true or rumors and speculation. Yeah, but then this was right before the documentary came out, and now all of a sudden he's flush with cash, moving to a new home. You know, so who knows what he gets paid? It's not like you can call the publisher and ask them; they won't tell you what they paid him for the book.
You know what's funny about the whole Bob story is how they were able, him and Gene, to sort of try and wipe out John Lear out of the story, because as you know, they met John Lear before.
Yes. And a lot of people I've heard from John Lear's own mouth that he gave Gene Huff and Bob Lazar all the Billy Meyer material right before Bob came out with his story, and the sport model and Billy Meyer's beam ship look exactly alike. So, you know, that's another red flag for me.
Well, he gave him a lot more than that, I'm sure. But also, you got to remember, John Lear was an Area 51 researcher. So
at the time, he was the Area 51 researcher.
How did Bob know that, you know, the timetable of the Janet jets or whatever? Well, he was friends with the #1 Area 51 researcher, and John Lear gave him all that information, as we know.
Yes, and John Lear is known for being generous and sharing with other people. He'll give you copies of pictures. He'll give you copies of tapes, you know, or he did at one time. Not so sure lately. Yeah.
Yeah, and John Lear is also what was I going to say? He had he had all the intel on Area 51, so he would have given Bob all that. So, and then Bob mysteriously, after meeting Lear and getting all this information, mysteriously gets a job at S4 starts telling the same story John Lear tells. I know people know this, but in 1987, John Lear was on George Knapp's show, and John Lear said that the government had acquired around 10 UFOs. One of them they tried to fly. Sound familiar?
Yeah, and then suddenly Bob Lazar gets it.
This is 2 years before Bob's story, and here's John Lear on George Knapp's show saying that story, and people don't realize that Bob stole that bit out of the story.
He stepped right into the story, right? Like, yeah, they have 10 flying saucers. I worked on one.
Yeah. And then there was a whole bit about, Dan Benkert mentioned this to me, and it's true that, Bob tells the story about the alien reactor and how the scientists before him tried to open it with a plasma cutter, I think it was, while it was running.
Yeah, that's a smart thing for scientists to do.
Yeah, and then there was a nuclear explosion, basically, that took out half the base and killed one scientist, I think it was. That was the one he had to replace. And then he drew a model of the alien reactor, and it looked exactly like the Demon Core.
Yeah, Demon Core is a famous story where people did,
Yeah. He just ripped that whole story. He ripped the Demon Core reactor and the whole bit about the scientists opening it and dying. And he just, he took the action. He didn't even change the design of the reactor, let alone the story. That's so frustrating.
Yeah,
and then this whole bit's like George Knapp shows a clip of supposedly where Bob took him through Lannel, and you don't see anyone in this clip except scenes of Lannel. And there's this one scene of this big machine. It looks like a big arch, and George Knapp voices over and says, "This is the particle accelerator that Bob worked on." But it's not a particle accelerator. It's this proton spectrometer. That's not even true. So, I mean, George is not a scientist, but if Bob was walking him through at that point.
Yeah, and if he said, that's the particle accelerator I worked on, then it stands to reason that George Knapp would do a voiceover and say, this is the particle accelerator. Yeah. One of my other favorite things with the particle accelerator is George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, and Bob Lazar at various times have stated that Bob Lazar had a particle accelerator in his bedroom, which is scientifically impossible. Ask any real physicist. You need a lot of space for a particle accelerator. You could have, some kind of technology demonstrator, or like a child or high school students, display of a particle accelerator that did something, but not a real particle accelerator that could do any work.
Yeah, I'm not really sure whether you could have a small one, or it wouldn't do much, basically, though.
No, he claimed to be making some kind of rare element that he was using in his battery bank for his hydrogen fuel cells. But in order to have a particle accelerator that can actually make, change matter, you need a big one. It's not something, that you could do in your bedroom. You need a huge, compound one, This is more of minutia, right?
Well, look, you don't even need to investigate Bob. You just need to look at his story and ask yourself, does it make sense? Look at this. I'll reel off a few points. When the government and actually the funny thing is the group behind developing the bomb was Lannel, believe it or not. They were heavily into that project, the Manhattan Project, and the government built a whole city, employed 130,000 people, and spent a mountain of money to develop the bomb that was based on scientific theory at that point, that they didn't even really know if it was going to work or not. So they spent all that money, employed 130,000 people to do it. Now, Bob says he worked on reverse engineering the propulsion of the saucer, and that there was 22 people in all looking at every aspect of the saucer. And it was only him and Barry that, I mean, I'm laughing now. It was
and when nobody's allowed to talk to Barry, nobody's ever allowed to talk to Barry.
That did the propulsion system. And so you got two people trying to work out the most, that would have been the biggest invention of history, and they had two people on it. I mean, bullshit, and I mean, I can just imagine when the scientist died, it was like, oh, sir, One of our scientists has died. Can we find someone to replace them? Oh yes. What about that Bob guy? That Bob guy. He
guy that builds rocket cars. Yeah.
The jet car guy that owns the brothel. Very good establishment. I've been there myself. Let's get Bob. Yes, Bobster.
Yeah, that's another thing I always think is funny. Like how many serious scientists do you know that woke up one day and say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start a whorehouse. You know, I'm just going to run a whorehouse for extra money.
You see the arguments around that. As soon as you bring that up, or the fact that Bob was bankrupt and that bankruptcy just had been finalized a year before his S4 story. So you got a bankrupt pimp who gets a job. John Lear gets his files, and then suddenly gets a job at S4, where him and only one other person named Bazza, nickname for Barry. So the Bobster and Bazza are reverse engineering a flying saucer. I mean, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. It's kind of ridiculous. But you know what is great is that the people that promote the story, they don't do well promoting the story because they lie. They do well promoting the story because they leave off all the stuff that you and I are talking about. Like they leave all of the stuff that would indicate he was a fraud, a bankrupt pimp, and a liar out of the story. And they just tell you the stuff that would lead people to believe that he was telling the truth. You know, he aced 4 lie detector tests. No, he didn't.
No, he didn't.
We did a whole piece on that. It was a joke. You know, he took they just kept giving him more tests until they got some results they liked. You know, he failed the first one. They get another polygraph examiner. He failed one test. He passed the other one. He failed a test. One test was inconclusive. You don't just keep giving somebody lie detector tests. You get one. That's what you get. You fail the first one, you're deceptive and a liar, and that's it. But, you know, that was done at the time. The lie detectors were done at the time that Stanton Friedman started blowing holes in Bob's education and story. So they needed something to bolster the story and keep it going, I guess.
Well, look, just, you know, in terms of a logic test, Bob says he's got some element 115. I mean, everyone obviously is going to say, well, why didn't he send some in? Yeah, obviously. Then you got George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell saying they know where Bob buries some. And then both George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell are yelling from the trees saying, oh, disclosure, we want disclosure. Oh, we know where some element 155 is, but we're not going to show you or give it to you. Disclosure.
Yeah, we're fighting for disclosure. And we have absolute incontrovertible proof of alien visitation, and we're not going to show it to you. You know, I've always said that. Like George Knapp is famously in a lecture he gave, he said, I know where some of that element 115 is buried, and maybe someday I'll dig it up. You're like, come on, bro. For 35 years, you've been pushing a story, and you've got the incontrovertible proof of it, and you're not going to show us it? That's bullshit.
Have you ever seen the movie It's a Mad, Mad World? And they dying guy tells them where there's some money hidden, and it's under a big W. And the big W turns out to be these palm trees shaped like a big W. Every time I hear George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell say they know where it's buried, I keep imagining that scene out of that movie where they end up with the big W and it's all under these palm trees and they're all digging it up.
Yeah. And there's been some, and the whole story of at the end of this so-called documentary, which is really a pro Bob Lazar fluff piece. You know, they claim that this company raid of his had something to do with the element 115. And I mean, I talked to the local police chief, and he was so surprised. And then he looked up Bob Lazar and went, I had no idea. You know, I knew that he had something to do with UFOs, but I didn't know he was so well known, or, you know, whatever. But the police chief was there at the raids, and he said this had nothing to do with flying saucers, man. This was a multi-state investigation involving a murder. We went in, we got the records we wanted, and we were out in an hour, and they make it sound like they were there all day or 2 days, and they searched through every inch of Bob's office and his warehouse. No, that didn't happen either.
They probably watched a few of his pornos, but yeah, I mean, look, the other thing is, you know, they talk about, you know, Bob having this video of element 115 where he shines a laser over this, what's it called, where they have that smoke, a vapor, whatever. And anyway, they say that, you know, he's shown this laser over the element 115, and it bends the laser because, you know, the gravitational effect of element 115. And that they tried to find the video, and Bob had taped over it with an episode of the Golden Girls. I mean, yeah, I just don't get a laugh. I mean, it's just the whole story is like this. It's just
he has absolute proof of this element 115, this alien saucer flying saucer fuel in a cloud chamber that proves it must be alien, and he tapes over it with Golden Girls by accident.
And then you think, oh no, but then you got to, if you're actually thinking about it, hang on, he's had some element 115 for all this time. Why doesn't he just repeat the experiment? It's only a 5-minute experiment. I mean, duh.
Yeah, and one of the other interesting science points too is that Bob has said that they did every imaginable scientific test to this element 115. If that were the case, he would know the isotopic ratios of this thing, and he would be able to reproduce it in a laboratory. He would be able to do that. He would be able to make the stable form that he talked about if he actually worked on this thing. Otherwise, it's just him guessing. Element 115 was predicted as far back, I think, as 1969 in chemistry books. So it's, you know, that's another prover that everybody, the Bob Lazar prover maneuver. Well, he talked about element 115 before we knew it really even existed. It was predicted to exist. All of the heavier elements were. And I think we're up to 116 or 117 now. So every few years we get another one of them become synthesized in a laboratory.
Yeah, I think we're higher than that. But yeah, the other nonsense story is George Knapp tells the story that he went to Bob's house and he was on edge, thought the government was after him, and he had a bit of element 115 in front of his homemade particle.
Yeah, he was going to blow up Las Vegas.
If the government came for him, he was going to flip the switch, and George Knapp says it would have resulted in an explosion that would have taken out the whole of Las Vegas. Now let's look at that. George Knapp's a reporter. He doesn't report it at the time. And it's a case of domestic terrorism, potentially. This guy could blow up the whole Vegas, killing 100,000 or how many people.
Yeah, millions of people.
And he doesn't tell the police. Yet at the same time, he says, I totally believe Bob. I mean, come on. It's a comedy show at this point.
You're right. I never thought about that. So George Knapp, although George Knapp ratted him out about the whorehouse, George Knapp didn't rat him out about thinking about blowing up all of Las Vegas, right?
The pandering documents are quite interesting. You know, the UFO. The madam he was in business with told the police that Bob had stiffed her $12,500. Excuse the pun, but yeah, she claimed that Bob owed her $12,500 and never paid her, and all sorts of things. And the pandering documents are quite detailed. They found his birth certificate, so all that story is nonsense.
Apparently he was a bankrupt pimp, and you can see from the bankruptcy documents, if you read them, that he really didn't like paying his bills or paying people that he owed money to. He stiffed the madam of the whorehouse, apparently, right? He stiffed his parents, and he stiffed most of his creditors.
Yeah, and the interesting bit about the pandering documents is that he had to list all his schooling, and it didn't list Pierce College at all. And even though we know he went there, and it lists for his, this is the really funny bit, okay? He says he finished high school in August '76, and it says he got 2 degrees in electronics and physics. In 1978, he graduated and got those 2 degrees. How, if he graduated high school in midway through '76, then how in '78 does he end up with 2 degrees? But here's the good
2
thing.
master's degrees. 2 master's
no,
degrees.
no, not the masters. The masters come later from MIT.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because there's always this question of where did he get his degrees? Because you have to have a degree before you get your masters.
You have to have an undergraduate degree, it's called. Yeah.
So no one's ever been able to work out where he got his degrees from. But so in the pandering documents, it was quite interesting because it said he graduated, as Stanton Friedman worked out, he graduated in August 1976 from high school. And in the pandering documents, it says he got a degree in physics and electronics from a correspondence university called Pacifica University.
Pacifica University, yes. And you know what I did when I got a hold of that information, I called admissions people both at MIT and at Caltech and asked them if you could get into a master's program with that, and they both laughed. They were like, "No, you need a real degree. We don't let people into master's programs with a degree mill degree that somebody bought."
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's right. He bought the degrees from Pacifica Uni. Was a front that got shut down live on TV in 60 Minutes when Mike Wallace interviewed Ernest Sinclair.
Yeah, they still exist. They still exist now, selling degrees that you can hang on your wall and fool your stupid friends with. But it's a worthless degree. You know, you can't like. People check when they go for employment now, you know, they know the difference between a degree mill degree and a real college. It's, you know, important. But I guess the interesting part for our conversation is that both MIT and Caltech said no way could he have gotten into any kind of master's program with a degree from that place. And interestingly, too, Caltech did not offer an electronics technology master's degree at the time he claimed to have gotten one. They didn't even have that there as a master's program. So
yeah, look, when you look at Bob's story, I've looked at his story and I've thought, you know what, he's made the story deliberately to be a joke, so that if I'm almost convinced that he made the story to be a joke, so that one day he can say, yeah, it was a joke. How did you believe it? I mean, I said this and this, and it's so unbelievable. Why did you believe it? He could easily do that now. He could easily say, look, it was all a joke, and
he could make one last cash out.
Why did you believe all that shit? You know, like, you know,
he could make one last big cash out and make a documentary about how he faked the whole thing and made it all up, and probably do just as good as if he still kept claiming that the story is real. Yeah, so so this is the history and Bob Lazar. I've always been fascinated by this case, mostly because I'm fascinated that people can still believe him. And some people are just true believers. And I could go through this whole list of things that you and I just have talked about with a true believer of Bob Lazar, and they just excuse everything. You know, government wiped his documents, you know, they try to cover it up. Bob's telling the truth. He's a real scientist because he built a rocket engine car. You know, and that means that he has to be a scientist. I've even heard somebody say he had a pocket protector, so that's why he had to be a scientist.
Yeah. Like, so the thing is, when he was at Lannell, the story had just broke in the newspaper about his jet car, and the jet car reporter had written him down as being a physicist. So everyone at Lannell knew Bob as the jet car guy who worked here as a physicist. So when Krengle says, "Oh, I heard rumor from people that he was he owned a jet car and maybe he was a physicist," that's where it comes from.
Yeah, and I have a source that works at Lannell who told me that people who worked there, when they saw the article, some of them were surprised because they knew that he wasn't a physicist, but they felt uncomfortable and they didn't want to go, "Why did you lie?" They just assumed maybe the guy, you know, heard him wrong or something like that. And interestingly, somebody got to that author who wrote that article to ask him if he verified that Bob was indeed a physicist, and he said, "No, he told me that, and I just wrote it in the article. I didn't think I had to check if he really was. I saw a rocket car and thought physicist makes sense. Wrote it in the article."
That was me. That was me that got in contact with the.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess
so basically Jeremy But what happened was Jeremy Corbell was going on and saying that he contacted the author, and Jeremy called him Terry English. Mm-hmm. His name was actually Terry England, but whatever. Easy to get wrong. And Jeremy was saying that he spoke to this guy, and Terry had told him that he checked if Bob had been a physicist at Lenell, and he had to do that because if he didn't do that, he would have been blackballed by the whole Lenell Los Alamos community and journalistic society, whatever.
It turns out that was bullshit.
Yeah, and what happened was I finally got in contact with Terry. It wasn't easy. It took me ages, like 6 months. But I finally managed to find someone who knew Terry to then get me Terry's contact. But when I emailed Terry, he told me I sent him a transcript of what Jeremy Corbell sent. And Terry said, that's complete bullshit. I never said any of this blackballing or any of this other stuff. I didn't check with Len. He said, all I did was take Bob's word for it. It would have been just something in conversation, and Bob would have told me that, and that's what I wrote down. And it was a story about his jet car, not his profession.
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, there we have it. I've been fascinated with some of the stuff that you have found and some of the stuff that you have done. I'm calling different places too, and I think that's much needed to prove or disprove some of these things, because this right-click researching, if it's not on the internet, we don't find it, is not the right way to go about, especially a story this old. It's 35 years old. You really got to pick up the phone. You really have to talk to people that have some knowledge about the case. So besides this, I know that you've been looking into some of these later UFO stories, like the Tic Tac and the Gimbal. So what is your take on what we are seeing in these videos that are being leaked?
Okay.
And I should put leaked in quotes, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because Alex Dietrich, who was one of the Tic Tac pilots, she gave an interview with Nick West. I only got halfway through it before this interview started. But so if anyone is interested, you're probably going to have a look at that. But I don't know. Let's start with the gimbal, because I've got something queued up on that. With the gimbal video, I don't know if people have seen an article on the Drive about Project Nemesis. Project Nemesis is about the US's cutting edge or latest iteration of their electronic warfare capability, where they use fleets of drones, all different types of drones, balloons, aircraft,
target balloons as well. Yeah, they use target balloons as well.
Yeah, and there's also a pattern with a balloon which is a sphere with a cube inside it, and that's a Navy pattern for that. Anyway, have a look on the Drive.
You can share your screen, and then I can allow it if you want to. You can share like a browser tab. It's down there in the middle, the share button, and then I can share it to the audience if you like. Otherwise, I could try to find what you're finding if you give me some keywords.
I'll post a link to the article in there. There
Project Nemesis.
Yeah, I just posted a link in the comments. But I hope I posted it. Yes, I did. Anyway, what it is it's. Maybe I should have started with a Tic Tac because it would have given you background. But anyway, the US's and every military's leading edge military capability is electronic warfare. It's not something that they talk about much, because half of it is about tricking the opponent. And if you're telling people what you're capable of doing, then you can't really trick them. So basically, you can see there it's got fleets of drones and things like that. On the right hand, that picture, I can't point to it, but there's a picture there of an F-18 with drones in front of it. One of the drones is a Northrop Grumman X-47B, and the other one's a Northrop Grumman BAT. These are electronic warfare drones, and they're weird things, and one of them is a cylinder with propellers on both ends.
Yeah, interesting.
And what they do is they fly these things out, and they do their electronic warfare stuff that basically they can spoof radar signals, they can jam radar signals, they can send out and imitate radar. They can pretend to be a missile coming at you. They can pretend to be a certain aircraft coming at you. They can pretend to be fleets of aircraft. And the object of using small drones is it's meant to be so that you can't pick up the drones on the radar because they're too small, but you can pick up what they're projecting. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so what it's meant to do is fool and bamboozle a Navy fleet. That's literally the charter of what it's meant to do. It's meant to say, look over here, there's a fleet coming at you, expend all your ordnance over here, send all your missiles, send your fleet, send your aircraft over here, while we come around here and bomb the shit out of you.
Yeah.
So that's what it's about. So, and that's why they keep it secret, because it's obviously you don't want to tell people what it's about. But obviously the guys at the Drive managed to get a bit of info, and they wrote that article about it. Now, the key thing here for the gimbal is the companies that were involved with this Project Nemesis was DARPA. And DARPA had issued a number of contracts to 7 companies. Now, there are 7 companies that are that it issued the contract to. One of them was BAE. It's a big company that Dan Benkert knows all about.
Yeah, he does.
And the other company is Northrop Grumman. Now, if you look at, so they issued these contracts to develop a lot of the systems for Nemesis to these 2 companies and 5 other companies. And the key Navy groups that were developing Nemesis are all on the East Coast. They're actually around, or was it North Carolina, Virginia, somewhere around there.
Sure.
Which surprisingly enough is where they keep seeing all the UFOs every day. So they've got all this stuff there, and they've given these contracts. And if you look up BAE's webpage, they will tell you that they're self-proclaimed world leaders in electronic warfare. They do a lot of things. They do an absolute ton of things. But one of the things they do is they're a world leader in electronic warfare, as is Northrop Grumman, and Northrop Grumman make a lot of drones. Now, if you saw in that picture, I mentioned 2 of those drones were made by Northrop Grumman from Nemesis. And these guys are all based on the East Coast. Now, the gimbal event happened on the East Coast, and that gimbal video was taken in January 2015 off the coast, north end coast of Florida, I think. Basically, in that documentation, if you follow it through, it talks about how they did a war game testing out Nemesis that ended in February 2015. So you've got a correlation there. Then you look
yeah, definitely.
You look at the gimbal video and what Ryan Graves talks about, and he says they saw fleets of these things. Well, this involves fleets of drones. You're saying, oh, one was a big thing and the other had little drones. Well, if you look at the picture, there's a big drone and there's little drones. So, you know, all these things are coming together. And then you look at where Project Nemesis is, and they're all around that area where they're starting to, you know, the key components of the naval bases and DARPA and all this sort of stuff. They're all at that East Coast area around where Ryan starts saying that, you know, later he says that they start seeing things every day. But that's also where Virginia Beach is, and Virginia Beach has a big issue with people letting loose party balloons. I mean, I'm talking about the sightings.
All the weddings on the beach.
Back at the gimbal, but
all the weddings on the beach. There's these things called
they've
wedding
actually issued
balloons.
huge fines for letting loose balloons there. There's a big article about it. And anyway, going back to the gimbal event 2015, they did the war game for Nemesis.
Here's a video, just for anybody that most people that are watching this are going to be aware of what.
Has it got the audio? Because listen to the audio.
Oh, do you want the audio?
Oh, the audio is important.
All right, let me redo it. I thought we didn't want the audio. Let's try this again, and I'll do it with the audio, because you're right. The audio is important, even though we don't know if that wasn't tacked onto it. There's no prominence here. We don't.
The audio is important, and if you can get, if you can find the TTSA version that's got they captioned it as well. And
this one is supposedly unedited.
Okay. The one that TTSA put out.
Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro.
Yeah, he said it's an
There's a
effing
whole
drone.
fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
Yeah.
My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, dude. Well, if there's look at that thing. It's rotating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of things to take out of that video. The wizard or the pilot says it is a effing drone. Right? He's telling you right there it's a drone. Two, you don't see any TV mode footage. There would have been TV mode footage. Why don't you see it? Three, it's called the Gimbal video. And if you watch Mick West's, I know people are going to freak out when you mention Mick West. You might watch Mick West's video. He talks about that being glare, and that's why it rotates, because the Atfler pod gimbals. That's what it literally does. It gimbals. Why does the Navy call it the gimbal video? It was the Navy that called it the gimbal video, not anyone else. It was the Navy that called it the gimbal video. Why did they call it the gimbal video? They've told you why.
And the pilot said, it's a drone. It's an effing drone.
They're calling it a gimbal because the Atfler is gimbling. And the thing is, the pilot's calling it a drone. But here's the kicker. Whenever you watch Ryan Graves on TV or doing an interview, he's always got this cheeky grin. And I'm thinking, this guy's hiding something, you know? He says,
right, he does.
I'm not saying it's aliens.
But it's really aliens.
Yeah. It's not right. I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's really weird, and they're doing really weird things, aren't they? I just told you that BAE was one of the key contractors in the self-proclaimed world leader in electronic warfare. Have a guess what company Ryan Graves ended up working at when he retired from the Navy?
A black budget.
BAE.
BAE. Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Guess where he works.
Electronic warfare specialists and drone manufacturers.
But guess where he works in BAE?
Where?
I looked at the BAE webpage, and they've got a webpage about their electronic warfare capabilities, and it's got 6 videos. I click on the last video about development of electronic warfare or something. 22 seconds in, there's Ryan Graves. I mean, what the hell? Follow the dots, people. These people are not being.
It doesn't make any sense that he's out there in the media trying to suggest that these are extraterrestrial spacecraft, unless it's a purposeful campaign to obfuscate the real truth that this is drone technology. You know, one of the other things I wanted to ask you, because this drives me crazy, my audience knows this. We have people in the media that show these grainy ass videos that with no clarity, and the facts that they contribute to the video don't match what we're seeing in the video. That's the one thing that drives me crazy. But the other thing that drives me crazy is when people say things like, no one on earth has this technology when it comes to transmedium craft or craft that can do 90-degree turns. And, you know, I don't know about you, but you can go down to Walmart and buy a drone for $50 that can do 90-degree turns. So it drives me crazy that people say, no one on earth has this technology. It must be aliens. What do you think about these sort of statements? Aren't they irresponsible and misleading?
Yeah, I don't think people dig deep. You know, I think we live in a very low information world at the moment. We live in a sort of weird situation where you've got, at no time have you ever had more information at your disposal, but at the same time, news reporting is at the lowest level of info ever. It's almost tabloid now.
Yeah. We want the sound bites. We don't want a deep, full story. You know, like this is why things like TikTok are so popular, because people's attention span. Nobody has attention span to sit and listen to real, you know, investigative work and you know, deep dives into a story. We want the 5-minute quick version, right?
Yeah. So maybe I'll load up an image of Ryan Graves on BAE's webpage.
Let me see if I can find it here. BAE Systems is an aerospace company, right? Yeah.
Look, I'll send you the link and you can bring it up.
Okay, yeah, you can send it through the private chat, I believe. Just click on that private chat icon over there. In the meantime, I want to remind everybody to like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help us to expand the show. We're trying to get me a bigger bullhorn. That's what I want for Christmas. That's what I want for my birthday. I want a bigger bullhorn. Because unfortunately, we're in a bad situation here because, you know, we're trying to give people that second red pill after they think they got red pilled. You know, we're bringing people inconvenient truths. And it's not easy growing a channel like this because we have to have facts in hand before we put our mouth in gear. We can't just sell people woo and garbage fake stories like so many other more popular, larger channels covering these subjects do. But I think it's important that there's the other side of the story. So maybe people can find me if they want to hear the other side of the story, that most people selling these stories and making huge amounts of money selling these stories leave out. I always find it convenient. They leave out all of this stuff that you and I are talking about. Nobody talks about this. And we should. It should be a part of the conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I sent you the link. If you go on that webpage, it's the last video, the 6th video, 23 seconds in.
We're going to see if we can't share that. Absolutely. Yeah, and I know you've got some opinions on the Tic Tac video as well.
Yeah, Tic Tac's harder, but I have some opinions. I have some opinions on some of it, and I have found a lot of information about that area that they perform training in, which absolutely.
Okay, so now I'm looking at the website. Which one of the videos? The last one? Distributed.
Yeah, it's called
Distributed Electronic Warfare?
Yep, that's the one. It's about 23 seconds in.
Let me see if I can't get it to play here. It's always weird when it's on like a website and not on not on like YouTube. Yeah. But I got it here. Let's see if we can share this. And you said it's 23 seconds in, but we'll cite fair use. It's a public website, so I think this is perfectly acceptable under fair use, but we're still going to cite fair use. We're educating the public about these subjects and using the material. We'll be discussing and critiquing the material we're sharing. This is called Electronic Warfare, Electronic Protection and Attack by BAE Systems. Interesting. Oop, let me make sure that one second. We want the audio. Bear with me, friends. There we go. Now we'll see. This is a great find. So this guy is in this video, and he's on the media saying it's alien.
Faces increasing threats. Adversaries with long-range multispectral electronics are challenging the warfighter's ability to access, communicate, and navigate in theaters of operation. To counteract these threats, BAE Systems is innovating technologies that, when integrated,
that's him.
New mission.
That is him. That is so funny. Let's watch it again. So I'll see if I can stop it there.
And navigate in theaters of operation. To counteract these threats, BAE Systems is innovating technologies that.
Great. So he's in the media going, I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. At the same time, he's working at this company which develops electronic warfare countermeasures and drone technology.
Not a company that does electronic warfare.
The company.
Leader in electronic warfare that had one of the contracts with DARPA to provide some of the stuff for Nemesis.
Do we want to watch the rest? Do we want to watch the rest of this? I guess.
Nah, it's pretty boy. It just talks about electronic warfare.
Electronic warfare.
New mission capability.
Look, distributed
electronic warfare will provide warfighters with efficient control and coordination of EW platform resources, formations,
look at the drones,
and activities that are necessary in contested environments. The platforms in this scenario are on a distributed electronic warfare mission, using advanced electronics, cognitive sensor processing, autonomy, and cyber technologies as they explore a hostile.
All right, well, we'll bounce out of that. Now we have to get to the Tic Tac. I want to know, what are your thoughts on the Tic Tac video? And then I guess.
Okay, so I think when you look at something like a story like that, you've got to look around the story. Where were they? What did they do there? What's around that area? When you start doing that, that's when it starts to fall into place, because that whole area the Tic Tac happened in, and also just a side note, all that triangle video and all the drones that you've been hearing about that happened in 2019, including that sphere that fell in the water and all that stuff, and the Tic Tac, all that happened in the SoCal Range Complex. The SoCal Range Complex is an area they do all their military training and testing of new weapons in. Okay, so what part of the charter is that they'll test the reactions, and they develop strategies based on that, and they'll test new weapons and see how they fare. There's a lot going on, and there's like 1,600 military exercises at least every year in that area. So you're talking about
it's a heavy test area for drone research.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on, and every time and any particular day, there's numerous military exercises happening in that day. So it's a complex theater. So it leaves the door wide open for a complex series of situations to happen, because they could be doing missile tests in one part of the range. They could be doing air-to-air exercises in another part. They can be doing anti-submarine exercises in another part. They can do, there's a whole bunch of stuff. They can be doing electronic warfare in that area, which I'll talk about in a minute.
Sure, yeah.
But if you look at the coast, and a lot of the facilities they have are on San Clemente Island. But if you look at the coast going down to San Diego is actually where SCORE is. SCORE is basically the facility they run the exercises from, and it's based in San Diego on the coast, that island, the North Island, whatever it's called. And then if you look onshore, you'll see things like there's a lot of companies that have offices there. There's companies that make electronic warfare systems, a lot of companies that make threat radar simulators. There's the Skunk Works.
Lockheed Martin, sure.
There's where they have the black projects. What's that called? I forget now. Next to Skunk Works. All the other guys are there. Basically, everyone.
It's basically called aerospace. It's called Aerospace Alley. You know how we have Silicon Valley? There's also Aerospace Alley, where all these aerospace companies are there, and certainly they probably are doing test flights and things. Their prototypes and their systems they're developing. So it's like Occam's razor. Are these things extraterrestrial alien spacecraft? Or maybe, because they were all seen right near where all this stuff is tested, they could be earthly drone technology.
Yeah, so with the Tic Tac, I know that on San Clemente Island since 1991, believe it or not, they've had numerous electronic warfare facilities, big ones, big electronic warfare facilities that have, amongst jammers, they've also got things called threat radar simulators, which basically do what they sound like. They can simulate a radar, they can simulate a missile's guidance radar and send out signals like that, and a ship will pick that up as if a missile's coming at them. They can simulate a aircraft search radar, so a ship will pick that up and as if an aircraft, and they can mimic basically fleets of anything coming at. Part of the reason they put those facilities there because it's cheaper to mimic stuff like that rather than send out real missile drones and stuff like that. This is all on San Clemente Island. San Clemente Island also has an area, I think it's at the south end, where they fire off drone missiles. They're basically jet powered. They fire them off, got a little wing. They look like a missile, and they use those for target practice as well. So there's a lot going on from San Clemente Island. And they can also use mobile emitters throughout the SoCal Range Complex. So they can make, they can spoof anything. basically.
Yeah, they could spoof aircraft, fighter aircraft, or ships.
Now, I'm not saying that that's what happened that day on the Tic Tac day, but it would explain all those weird tracks that they picked up around San Clemente Island, funny enough. So, you know, you talk about those radar tracks doing weird things. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about that because Kevin Day didn't really see that himself. He asked someone else. Someone told him. It's like a fourth-hand discussion.
Yeah, my uncle's brother's cousin told me they saw this.
There's no real first-hand knowledge of anything going from 80,000 feet to sea level in a second. Kevin Day's talking about that. It's like third hand. Anyway, he talks about seeing these objects on the radar coming down. First, this is his first-hand account. He talks about all these objects coming down in the fleet, just sort of through the SoCal range complex, and they disappear before they get to Guadalupe Island. Funny enough, Guadalupe Island is at the southern end boundary of the SoCal range complex. So
yeah, so they're staying within the test complex.
Yeah, so
and these sightings are literally within drone test.
Well, they're in the SoCal range complex where they conduct all the military training, and the military training is just to give you an idea of the different military training they do. They do missile tests, they'll do anti-submarine exercises, they'll do air-to-air exercises, they'll do electronic warfare exercises, they'll even do cryptologic simulation. There's just absolutely motzes of stuff going on, and part of the stuff they do there, and it's in the charter of what they do. I'm not making this up. They do test new weapons there. They do test new weapons in the area to see how they fare, and they also test the fleet to gauge their readiness and their reactions, so that they can build new tactics based on their reactions. This is in the charter of what they do there. So amazing. I think people got to remember what actually is happening in this area. This is where shit's going down. So there's a number of there's just an absolute plethora of explanations that could explain those radar tracks where they were flying in formation coming down at 100 knots. It could have been an electronic warfare exercise. I know I've got documentation that shows they did 500 to 600 electronic warfare exercises that year. So almost 2 a day, or 1.5 a day.
And what do you say to the people, though, who argue, and I've heard this argument, and I think it's ridiculous, that if anybody was testing something, they would let the Navy ships know? Yeah, I think that's garbage. If you're testing a black project, you're not telling anybody.
Yeah, both PJ Hughes and another Tic Tac interviewee called Carson Crammell, they were both witnesses in the Tic Tac. They were on the ships. Both of them basically said that's bullshit. That they know personally of exercises that were ran where they knew that no one else knew. So it's totally feasible that, you know, the brass would know and no one else would know. I mean, how do you test something if it relies on, if you're trying to test someone's reaction? How do you tell them? The whole test, it voids the test right there and then. You can't tell them.
Especially if you want to see, maybe, let's just say, for example, they just want to see how a Navy ship would react to this in their airspace, right? Could they approach it? Could they shoot it down? Like, what are they going to do? Maybe that's part of the tests to see how our defenses would handle a possible foreign aircraft incurring into U.S. airspace and the ship's airspace.
That's right. So yeah, so you got all that going on, and that you got all those possible explanations for the radar tracks. It could have been electronic warfare exercise. There was plenty to go around. It was the second most or the most type of exercise they did that year was electronic warfare. So that should tell you something right there and then. But here's the kicker. They called it control and command warfare, C2W. And C2W is, in the documentation I looked at, is used synonymously with EW and references electronic warfare. But if you look up C2W, along with electronic warfare, it includes a couple of other things that are quite interesting. The other things, other than electronic warfare, it includes is military deception, psyops, and Civil War there.
Yeah, that's not a coincidence, Victor. That's just a coincidence. Must be just a coincidence.
That's just a coincidence. And but that doesn't answer what the Tic Tac thing itself was. And there's a whole bunch of things going on there. It's very confusing because Alex Dietrich says she had eyes on the Tic Tac for 8 seconds. Fravor says he had eyes on the Tic Tacs for 5 minutes. So there's a huge discrepancy there. So I don't know what's going on there. There's different reports taken at different times. There's a report that was leaked by the guy who said he worked on the Nimitz, who went under the username The Final Theory and leaked the Tic Tac video, and a report called the Event Summary, which was meant to be a report of what happened, taken from the pilots on that day. And that tells a different story. Then there's the ATIP report that says a different story. There's a TTSA report, and there's a different story altogether.
These things don't often match or jive with each other, which leads to more speculation. If you want to stop conspiracy theories, get your facts straight, and don't tell 6 different stories. One of the other things that I think is interesting is that these, people are claiming, well, I'm releasing this unclassified video from the classified briefing, and I don't know, but I've talked to people who worked on Navy ships. We have Rilo 704 works on Navy ships, and he said you can't just take your cell phone out in a command center and start taking videos and give them to journalists. You'd get fired, you'd get court-martialed. And also, if they do take any sort of video or have data on an unknown aircraft, they don't declassify that because that's, a problem. We don't know what this aircraft was. Could have been Russian, Iranian, Chinese, one of our other adversaries spying on us. We're going to investigate this fully. We're not going to unclassify this video of some flying object in our naval airspace, and infringing right near Navy airships, and we're not just going to declassify it and give it to journalists. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So in regards to the Tic Tac, I mean, if you look at the reports, it leads to a few scenarios. One report says the USS Louisville submarine was there in that vicinity conducting live fire tests in the vicinity of where the Tic Tac was meant to be. So some people think that they accidentally got vectored into a live fire test, and they're trying to hush it up. The other thing is, and this is a real weird one, follow me through with this one, but Fravor and Alex weren't the first person to see the disturbance in the water. The first jet on the scene was the Douglas Cheeks Kurth. He was flying a single-seater F-18C, and he was part of the Marines. And oddly enough, Fravor and Alex were meant to start a war game with Kurth and another pilot soon, just before that, but they sort of got redirected just as they were meant to start an aerial battle between each other, Marines versus Navy. And
and why do you not hear about this first pilot who witnessed it? You hear almost nothing about him. Fravor is the front man on this story. He's been on all the interviews. Joe Rogan, Lex Friedman, all these different media outlets interviewed him, but nobody's interviewed the first pilot who witnessed this thing.
Yeah, he didn't witness the Tic Tac. What he said was he was vectored there, and as he got close to about 15 nautical miles, he picked up Fravor and Alex's jets on the radar, and he could see them approaching as well. And he then got another radio call to say, skip it, because 2 other jets are going there. So go back to your cap point or whatever. But he decided on his own, close enough, I'm going to fly over anyway. So no one knew he was doing this. And he flew over this disturbance in the water and circled around it. At that exact time, Alex and Fravor rolled up. And they were looking down and saw something. Kurt saw Alex and Fravor. Fravor and Alex didn't see Kurt.
Interesting.
Kurt didn't see a Tic Tac. Alex and Fravor didn't see Kurt. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, so it could be as simple as this was an airplane and it was observed from a distance far enough away that maybe the body shape of it or whatever was obscured from their view because of the distance involved.
Yeah, I mean, there was a bit in the event summary that talked about haze being present. Although there was no clouds, there was a lot of haze apparently. So, did they see Kurt? Did they see Douglas Kurt's jet? He did fly up. He was at that perfect time. He flew around the disturbance in the water. They saw something over the disturbance of the water. And then he flew off. So, yeah, it's a bit weird.
But here that's a pretty boring story, misidentified aircraft or misidentified drone, right? Or for that matter, misidentified target balloon, right? It could be a lot of different things, but these alien hucksters, they sort of, they skip over that. One thing I didn't know is that David Fravor has an incredible amount of television appearances before Tic Tac. He was like on a reality show before the Tic Tac, so it's just kind of weird, Yeah, Carriers.
Did you know that Carriers was filmed the couple of months after the Tic Tac event?
No, I did not know that, so that's interesting.
And here's another one. Remember I told you that BAE and Northrop Grumman were key contractors to the Nemesis project, the electronic warfare Nemesis project, and I mentioned how Ryan Graves ended up working for BAE in the electronic warfare area.
Mm-hmm.
Guess where Fravor ended up working?
Not for BAE.
Northrop Grumman.
Yeah. And it's interesting that there is ample and supportive evidence of defense contractors knowingly and willingly spreading alien stories to cover their tests, right? Yeah. They float stories. They've been caught sending people to UFO conferences with stories and other things. So what if this might be aliens is just they're trying to cover their tracks for the testing that they're doing. And like you mentioned, there could have been some kind of exercise that these Navy personnel stumbled onto, didn't even know was taking place.
Yeah. Or they saw Douglas Kurt and just mis-ID'd it. I mean, it sounds ridiculous. I know.
I don't know if this is ridiculous too. I don't know if this is true. Lee says his call sign is sex. It can't be. Really? David Sex Fravor? Yeah, is it really?
It is.
That dude picked sex for his call sign. Look at him. I don't even want to think about that. That's gross.
Yeah, but look, let's picture this. Picture the scenario. Fravor and Alex are vectored to the Tic Tac area. They're told they're given a real world vector. It's a real world scenario. They've been taken off training, and as you've seen in all their testimonies, they were really concerned about it because they didn't have any weapons on their planes.
Yeah, so they couldn't. What if that? Yeah, and that says something about the operational readiness of the United States military, which is scary to me, because what if that was a Chinese fighter plane or bomber? They don't have any weapons to deal with a threat that's flying right towards the California coast?
Yeah, so they're on edge. They roll up. They don't know what to expect. They see something flying. It starts going around, doing some weird things around this disturbance on the water. Douglas Kurt's not meant to be there. They're not expecting Douglas Kurt to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just go, just a hypothesis here, a theory. Let's say they see Douglas Kurt down there. He's in an F-18. They say it was an F-18 size object. He circles around and he flies back up. At closing speed, it would have been more than supersonic. And he flashes by. They say they didn't get electronic. They say they got jammed. Well, what could jam another F-18? An F-18. An F-18 has EC on it. It's got radar jamming.
Radar jamming. Yeah, one of those pods underneath some of those F-18s
Yeah.
are actually radar jamming. It's a pod filled with a device that will jam enemy radar, and they routinely will fly with that on.
That's right, and it's an automatic. I understand one of the systems is automated, like it'll automatically jam a radar lock. So you've got that. When you look at that story, it all fits. Every single bit of it fits. That it may have been Douglas Kurtz's jet, except the visual. They saw something. They say it looked like a Tic Tac. And obviously an F-18C is not a Tic Tac. So but they were far away from it. It would have been, what, 4,000 or 5,000 feet or just above the water, they said. And they were at 24,000 feet. So that's quite a long way away. So
Sure.
With a bit of haze, might have looked like a, maybe particular type of paint job. Who knows? Maybe it did look like a Tic Tac. But it is interesting. So all I'm saying is that it's a complex story. The details are really unclear. There's various types of reports. A lot of stuff was happening in the SoCal Range Complex. There was war games and exercises galore happening every single day. There was a sub firing missiles in that area, for goodness sake. You got Kurtz flying past this disturbance in the water and flying around it when he was not meant to be there. They didn't see him. He didn't see a Tic Tac. I mean, yeah. Other than that, yeah, that's all I know about the Tic Tac event. Is so make of all that as you will.
But again, I love this because tonight you talked about all of these things that get left out of the story. There's things that nobody talks about as far as like possible very terrestrial explanations. And listen, I'd like for people to realize that I'd like to be a believer, but when I'm just skeptical because of the amount, first of all, because of the amount of UFO fraudery and forgery and fakery that goes on. And secondly, when you really study some of these events, you see that the people pushing the stories, they leave out very important information that people deserve to know. Like I said, the other side of the story here is what we're hearing today.
Yeah. So there's that. Yeah. So I'm 99%, 95% sure the gimbal stuff is nothing special, but they saw drones basically. And that sphere in the balloon or square inside a sphere was probably one of those modern version of those radar reflector balloons that are funny enough deployed from an F-18. There's just shows that sphere with a square, a cube in it, actually being deployed from an F-18. I mean, it could have been a modern version of that had some ECM instead, probably. They saw
and by ECM, just for the benefit of the audience, you mean electronic countermeasures?
Yeah. So they were doing a war game test of Nemesis on the East Coast. They ended in February. They saw the gimbal in January. It's the contract for Nemesis went to BAE and some other companies, Northrop Grumman, etc. Ryan Graves is talking about the gimbal story. It ends up Nemesis is produced by, I said, BAE and Ryan Graves ends up with BAE working in the electronic warfare video. I mean, come on. Every time I see that guy, he's grinning and it's like almost trying not to laugh. So, and the go faster, I mean, who cares if the thing was going fast or not? The thing was flying along in a straight line, could have been anything. It's the biggest non-story ever of the go fast. So yeah, so I got pretty, it's pretty disillusioning when you look at all that. But there was a story that I looked at last that probably disillusioned me the most, and that was the Westall case in Australia.
I was just going to ask you about the Westall case in Australia because you're an
Yeah.
Australian. I have not done a deep dive into that case. What can you tell us, first of all, about the case and what you found?
Okay. So generally, if you don't know the story, there was in 1966, and fun fact, I grew up less than a mile from where this took place. This is why it was a hometown story for me. So yeah, 1966 in a place called Westall, which is the suburb next to where I grew up. There was two schools next to each other, a primary and a secondary, and tons of kids, tons of teachers. Middle of the day, or I think it was the morning, like 10 o'clock or something. A lot of kids on the oval doing PE, which is physical education, and they look up and they see something in the sky, and it's like a silvery thing. It goes around, and they're all excited. They run into the classrooms and they tell some of the teachers. One teacher, I think, comes out. Another one comes out a little later and just misses most of it. There was also one teacher already on the oval, and they see all this thing. Some of them say they saw a plane going around it. It looked like a Cessna. They see this thing. Maybe it makes some moves. Generally, it's just floating around, and then it flies over past the school to about a point half a K away, which is about 500 yards in your American talk, and it flies over these trees and seems to come down over these tall pine trees, and supposedly later it flies off. That's the core bit of the story, okay? If you watch the Westall 66 documentary, there's all this added stuff in there that makes it an interesting story. There's one where a boy goes up, sees two UFOs land next to the school. There's a border fence on the school. He jumps the fence, and there's two UFOs there. And he and a number of kids are around this UFO. He's so close he could touch it, but he's about to touch it, but he decides not to because he can feel some heat off it. And there's other kids around the other one. There's tons of kids behind the fence. I imagine lots of them are overhanging, watching. Two things. There is no other students that corroborate that out of hundreds of students. And I know the director of that documentary interviewed and got testimonies from lots of kids. No other kid could verify it. The only thing he could verify was sort of like someone whose mother may have worked at the shop or something said that they think they did see that at a window of a business that was down the street. I asked him what about all these other student witnesses that were there that this boy says were there, and he says no other witnesses came forward. No one can back him up, really. So I'm like, well, why did you put it in a documentary? So there's that one aspect. If you ever watch the documentary, you'll know it's the key bit in that documentary. There's another bit about, if you ever watch the documentary, you'll know this bit. There's a bit about this girl called Tanya who ran up to the UFO when it landed over the pine trees, her and some other girls. And before the two other girls could get there, this girl Tanya supposedly got there, and she came back running and screaming, and later she fainted at school and an ambulance had to take her away. And that story is told secondhand from one of the other witnesses. So I said, did Tanya ever get found? Did you ever talk to Tanya? And the producer of the documentary, whose name is Rosie, did find her and interviewed her. And Shane, who's in the documentary, he's the guy you see in the documentary, he said that Tanya remembered the event, but didn't remember some, or at least some of the things that some of the other witnesses said about what had occurred with her. So I'm like, so why did you put that bit in the documentary? So you get to another bit and there's a girl that says who's a woman now, obviously, and she says that she got to there and didn't see it, but saw it up in the air as it took off. She got close and didn't get to where it landed. She presumed it landed, didn't see it land, but when she got close, she saw it way up in the sky, and then it took off. And then that's in the Westall 66 documentary, but in a recent TV network special, she's in there saying, "Oh yeah, I saw it land. I went right up to it, and I felt the heat off it, and I had these purple lights around
it's a
it."
changing story over time.
I'm like, what the?
Yeah,
So
and people add to the story. There's other kids that there's other kids that claim they saw aliens, and you know, but none of the. It's like there's not a lot of consistency or corroboration between the stories, and
No.
So
I was polite about it, and I said, "Look," I spoke to Shane. I said, "Look, she's changed her story," and it was like, "Oh, did she?" I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm like, "Come on, man, this is like a huge story change."
Yeah.
Between your documentary and what you just said last night on TV, and he's like, "Well, what can happen is that when they do an interview, they can cut it and make it seem like people say different things, and because she never saw it on the ground." I'm like, "Well, she specifically said she saw it on the ground for a minute before it took off. Well, maybe it was just hovering above the ground." Well, in your documentary,
he's got to make excuses. And I just want to take a moment to recognize here. Hold on, we have Tractor Basil with a kind and generous $5 super chat, first of the night, and we're an hour and 41 minutes in. So thank you very much. Says, buy a couple of tacos, praise the cash. We're always praising the cash here, Victor. Praise the cash, hallelujah. Every dollar helps us continue this work. Thank you for your kindness, your generosity, and support. Tractor Basil with a kind and generous donation. We read every single super chat here, so thank you for your kindness.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And then in the recent film, The Phenomenon, that guy went back and re-interviewed all the children and claimed that they all stuck to their story 100%. So
yeah, right.
Really depends on.
Yeah. So basically, as I interviewed, so then I got stuck into it a bit more. Like, red flags are popping up all over the place. So then I started talking to the people that were witnesses, because you can do that.
Yeah, and Dark Sky Files is in the live chat.
Yeah,
and he says he literally just posted that documentary on his channel. So if you want to see the documentary that Victor is talking about on the Westall on this case, you can go over to Dark Sky Files. I encourage you to go subscribe. He's got a lot of old documentaries, old interviews of John Lear and stuff that's melting off the internet that you can't get anywhere else. It's a really good source for this kind of information, especially the older stuff that is getting increasingly more and more hard to find.
So yeah, then I started talking to some of the, just chatting to some of the witnesses. They're grown up now, obviously. This happened a very long time ago. And these are confirmed witnesses. And I noticed people were posting occasionally. There'd be a witness pop up saying, what are you guys talking about? It was a balloon. And
oh, you know what? I'm confusing it. Actually, the phenomenon was on the Ariel Zimbabwe case, not the Westfall case. So I apologize.
Okay,
absolutely
yeah,
right.
Yeah, confused.
Because they're very similar cases, because they both involve school children seeing UFOs and aliens. So I apologize. I conflated the two. Easy to do. Thanks for correcting me there, Jay Roach. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I started talking to a couple of witnesses, and I started noticing some witnesses saying that they actually saw and thought it was a balloon. And then there was like a little war that would erupt between the other witnesses that were part of the Westall 66 doco, and these people saying it was a balloon, and it was like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, and oh, you. So I started talking to these people, and they were like, yeah, it's a balloon. And I said, did you know the guy that said he went up and almost touched it? And he goes, yeah, he lives around the corner from me. He's full of shit. I see him every second weekend at the pub. Guy's just he's full of crap. I'm like, okay. No one at the time knew of anyone that went up to a saucer. And I started noticing that even the people that thought it might have been a UFO, they were also saying things, stuff like, who's this guy that says he saw it on the ground? I never heard that at the time. And everyone was saying, how come the story keeps growing from what it was? And all these comments from other witnesses. And so yeah, there's that. And then I started asking him some questions. And he told me that he went to a gathering where all the witnesses got together, and the media went around talking to all the witnesses, and they got to him, and he said, yes, it was a balloon. That's what I saw. I saw a balloon. And as soon as he said that, they walked off.
Yeah, they didn't want to hear anymore. Yeah, because that's not going to sell the story. The aliens are going to sell the story.
That told me right there and then how these alien stories come about, because balloons don't sell, aliens do.
Yeah, well, we see that in these recent George Knapp drops too. Those things to me look clearly like balloons or nothing burgers. But hey, I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's probably aliens. You know, they dance around the alien issue, but they know they're pushing this alien narrative, and it's unfortunate. Because, you know, honestly, I'm not interested in balloons. I'm not interested in drones. I'm not interested in misidentified aircraft. I'm only interested in possible alien spacecraft visiting Earth. That's my interest. So all this other stuff is just noise in the signal that you have to separate, you know?
Yeah. So when you look at that Westall 66 documentary, the only thing that's really substantiated is they saw something in the sky, it flew around, maybe there was a plane, and then the object went, half a mile away, or not quite that, and landed over some pine trees. And maybe they went there later. That's about it. There's, once you take out, and that when you take out look at it that way, all the key things in that documentary are just unsubstantiated.
Yeah, and isn't it a little bit?
It was a balloon. I'm just saying that all the fanciful stuff of people saying they saw it on the ground and it definitely was a flying saucer is bullshit.
Yes, and isn't it interesting? Like I swear there was a point in time where if I saw it in a documentary, I assumed that it was true and that the people making the documentary did adequate research and were, sure that the things that they were presenting were true. But really, the documentary is a very loose term. We've seen it in this Jeremy Corbell documentary, so-called documentary on Bob Lazar. That's not a documentary because he left out more than half of the story. Anything that would indicate that Bob Lazar is a fraud, a liar, a convicted bankrupt pimp. Let's leave that out because that doesn't sound good for his credibility, that he's a convicted bankrupt pimp,
Well, if it's what's proclaimed to be an investigative piece, where's the interviews with Bob's fellow students at MIT?
We'll never find it. Yeah.
With the professors. Where's the interviews with people he worked with prior to?
And it's interesting, Victor. I just have an old friend, somebody that I've known for like 20 years, really old friend, and he just saw Bob Lazar on Joe Rogan, and he was convinced. So he contacts me and he's like, "Did you ever do a show on this?" And I'm like, "Don't get me started. I could send you 20 links on this case," And then he's like, "Well, I watched this video, and he sounds like a scientist, and he's an engineer, So he was totally convinced by Bob Lazar's explanation. He watched the old video Bob made of how the flying saucers work, and he said, no, only a scientist would be able to present this technical. And I'm like, no, that doesn't prove anything. And we're back and forth, and he's like, well, he must be a scientist. I'm like, his education's fake. This is fake. This is fake. But he still wants to believe the story. So he's still kind of arguing with me over it. And by the way, hey, Art. And Reemsey with a kind and generous super sticker donation for $5. Thank you, Reemsey, for your continued kindness, generosity, and support. And Patreon supporters should know that Reemsey played his amazing grand pianos on one of my songs, which will be on Patreon for all the Patreon supporters this month. Thank you, Reemsey, for your kindness. God bless you. We're a viewer-supported show. The best way to support our show is to throw money at me. That's the best way, okay? Because If people can get all this money for lying to people or leaving out half of the story, then somebody should be there to provide the other half. And I can't thank you enough, Victor, for helping me do this. I know that you dropped all this information that nobody's heard before tonight. So I have a feeling that this video is going to blow up because this is all stuff that nobody's heard. Most of this stuff nobody has heard about yet. And I want to thank you for dropping it here.
No worries.
And we want to go through all your unreleased interviews and air them here. That's what we should do. We'll give you, you know, you got to have a place to put them, right? You got your own place to put them, but they're welcome here as well.
Yeah. There's so much stuff. I mean, I must admit, after the Westall case, I was pretty disillusioned with it all. You know, like you, I want to believe that there's a true story out there. And I'm not a debunker. I look at these stories and I think, well, that's really interesting. I want to find out more.
Yeah, let's learn more. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and then you learn more, and the disappointment comes, right?
Yeah, that's it. That you got it. So it's always in that learn more phase that the red flags start popping up, and you just can't ignore them after a while.
Yeah, and I remember ages ago when I would hear somebody say things like, you know, I was a Navy SEAL, and I just went, oh, this guy was a Navy SEAL. And then he tells some story about aliens or the secret space program, and you would think, well, he was a Navy SEAL. It's crazy that a real Navy SEAL would be telling these stories. And then you find out he was never in the Navy. He certainly was never a Navy SEAL, and he's some kind of convicted criminal pretending to be these things. You know, there's this layer of illusion over many of these stories that we really need to peel back the layers of the onion and get to the root, really, before you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And V says, more Vic, more. She's your biggest fan. She was one of the people who said, you got to have that guy come and do a whole show. Everybody loved your panel appearance. So you were the most requested guest that I've ever had from a panel. Like, you know, I've had panels before, but nobody's ever like emailed me and sent me so many messages about a particular panel guest saying, forget those other guys that were on. We got to have this guy talk, and we want to hear what he has to say. It's great that you could do this.
No worries. There's more where that came from, so some other day.
Yeah, well, we would love to have you again, and I don't want to keep you too long, so I'm going to probably throw you out here and do a quick wrap up, maybe spend some time with the live chat, or if you want to stick around for a little while, maybe we could take some questions from the live chat.
Okay, I can take some questions. Yeah.
Okay, if anybody has questions in the live chat for Victor, please do put them in all caps. If anybody has any questions, otherwise we're going to let him bounce. We're going to let him bounce out of here. AJ says, I don't think we're finding out tonight. I don't know what that's about. V was saying more. Any questions, V, for Vic? Please let me know in the live chat. And while we're waiting for some questions to pop in, I just want to remind everybody that's listening in audio podcast land, Victor, we're now on every audio podcast network that you can be on. So you can get this podcast anywhere. But if you're listening on audio land, you're missing out on half the fun, which is coming to the live chat. You hear me reading these comments from our live chat. We take questions from our live chat. We take live call-ins. So if you're listening in audio podcast land, please go on YouTube and search for Truthseekers. Look for the weird guy with the sunglasses and subscribe. And you too can come and be a part of our community here. We're building a community of Truthseekers. It's not just me. We're all here looking for the truth behind some of these incredible stories. Come and join us. And first question here from Jay Roach. Vic, have you looked into what the science teacher had said regarding Westall?
Yes, I have. He was on a Channel 7 special. That same Channel 7 special has said one of the other witnesses changed the story. Mr. Greenwood, his name is. But I think if that's who you mean. I'm not sure if Greenwood was a science teacher. Yeah, I think that's who you mean. And Mr. Greenwood was one of was the second teacher, I think, to see it, because there was a teacher on the Oval at the time teaching physical education. That was a lady. I'm not sure if you're referring to her or Mr. Greenwood, but Mr. Greenwood changed his, said some really weird things on the Channel 7 special as well. He said that the US president had a secret UFO program to look into UFOs, and that he sent a UFO researcher out to interview him in Australia. And then it got to this weird bit where, like, oh, I can't remember his name, and then the interviewer says, oh, was it McDonald? And he said, yeah, that's it, McDonald. I did a face palm.
He got interviewed by Ronald McDonald.
Yeah, McDonald is I think that's his name. McDonald. It's that famous UFO researcher. What's his name? His last name is McDonald, anyway. And he came out to Australia to do some work for the Navy, to do some talks or some atmospheric stuff based on his job. And in his own spare time, he went, and on his own dime, he went out and did some research on some Australian cases, because he was a famous US researcher and did a lot of UFO research in America. So when he came to Australia on his job to do whatever he's doing, he took it upon himself in his spare time to do some research for some Australian cases. And that's when he went out and spoke to Greenwood. He wasn't sent by the president because of some special US program. All that was just complete bullshit by Greenwood. There was another thing I raised with Shane, the Westall documentary maker. It was that point. And he was like, oh, yeah, I noticed that as well, but I don't know why he said that.
Yeah.
He also said, Greenwood also said that some people from the Air Force came and visited him 2 weeks later and threatened him that they'd say he was a drunkard and that he'd lose his job if he spoke about the Westall case.
Interesting.
In a McDonald interview, which was conducted like just a year after the incident, he never mentioned any of that to him. And I also talked to Shane, the documentary guy, about that as well, and he said, yeah, I thought that was weird as well. I'm like, it just gets ridiculous.
Absolutely. And another question here from V: has Victor ever had an experience himself?
No, I haven't had an experience.
Okay, and here we have Solar Warden asking, Victor, what did Glenn Campbell tell you? Did he mention Chuck Clark at all?
Chuck Clark? No Chuck Clark, I don't think. Not that I remember, anyway.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what that interview, what kind of, how did that go? What did he talk about in general?
Glenn said some explosive stuff about Bob. Particularly about Bob calling him and telling him that he had received some explicit photos of Glenn Campbell and just wanted to let him know, which was a veiled threat. So
it was like a threat? Stop talking shit about me and my UFO stories, or I'm going to release nude photos of you or something?
Yeah, Glenn said he didn't really understand what Bob was trying to tell him at the time, but then when he hung up, he realized, oh.
The bankrupt pimp is threatening people. The bankrupt pimp is threatening people like a gangster. What do you know, right? Yeah, and somebody mentioned it's James McDonald, most likely. Yeah.
Yeah, that is James McDonald. That's correct. It is James McDonald. James E.
Yeah,
McDonald.
And that guy's interesting. He died of a suicide by gunshot. He shot himself.
Sad story. Sad story.
Sad story, absolutely, yeah. But he was one of those early pioneers, a physicist that was interested in and investigating UFOs, mostly from his own curiosity, not for the U.S. government,
That's right. I don't think it's like a lot of people used to ridicule all the UFO researchers, and that I totally disagree with that. I think it is worth looking into. I think those people should be able to do it without being ridiculed. That's for sure.
Somebody's asking, kind of unrelated, what do you think of Phil Schneider's story and suicide? Are you familiar with Phil Schneider? He's the guy who came out with all these.
With Phil Schneider, no.
Yeah, well, I would tell you, Dustin, Miles, Dio, that Phil Schneider, a lot of people don't know this, but Joe from the Carolinas did this excellent report on him and did a deep dive and found out that Phil Schneider had some kind of a strange psychological condition that caused him to mutilate himself. And Phil Schneider's part of his story was he would hold up his hand that was missing fingers and stuff and say that the aliens shot him with a ray gun. But it turns out that Yeah, it turns out Phil Schneider spent a lot of time in and out of mental wards, and I believe that his suicide was just that. He didn't have any truth about aliens. He was another grifter out there on the scene, according to a lot of good supportive evidence that he was a mental patient who mutilated himself. So
Okay.
there's not much credible. And he got caught lying in a lot of areas about his family history with the military and the government. You know?
Was he part of that Dolch story? Or
Yeah, it wasn't Dulcie, but he basically said that he worked for the government building these DUMBs, deep underground military bases, and that they were drilling, and all of a sudden there was aliens, and then the government had to send like Marines in there, and there was a firefight between the aliens, and it's just a crazy story. And then he ended up killing himself under somewhat mysterious circumstances. And people, of course, ran with that, like, well, they tried to cover him up because he was telling the truth about aliens. But it turns out he was not a credible person. He was literally a mental patient who started going on the UFO circuit telling stories about aliens and things like that, and deep underground military bases. People to this day still don't know that he had that weird condition, which caused him to mutilate himself. And VCMD Propulsionist here wanted to know what do you think about Mark McCandlish's suicide of the ARV fame? Are you familiar with him?
I've heard the name. I probably heard the story.
That's okay. He recently killed himself, and then people did the same thing they did with Phil Schneider.
He's the guy that did the illustrations of.
Yeah, they ran people recently, like totally not credible people like Kerry Cassidy and Jordan Sather and others ran with the story that he was murdered by the deep state. And I talked to the coroner, and all of those stories are largely horseshit.
Yeah. I see someone's asking about Valentish. That's another famous case in Australia. So I think, if I remember right, that's the one where the guy was flying a plane. And
oh yeah, here, I'm sorry, I missed that one. Sorry about that, AJ. Victor, what about our second most famous incident, M. Valentich?
Yeah, I think that's the one where a guy was flying a light plane and or a Cessna or something, and he was flying towards Tasmania or one of the islands between Victoria and Tasmania or something like that, and he reported in on radio seeing a light above him, he was reporting a UFO basically, and it got pretty hairy, and then he disappeared. And it is another famous case in Australia because some people say that a UFO abducted him and his whole plane, sort of thing, and no one ever knows what ever happened to him. So, I don't know much about it other than the story itself. It's a weird one, that's for sure. That area is a rough part of the world. Like, it gets pretty rough between Victoria and Tasmania. It's like a channel of water, and that water was really rough. I know firsthand because I've taken a ferry over Bass Strait, and it's rough as guts.
Interesting.
So it does get pretty windy and wavy. And yeah, he could have got caught in a storm. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, Chris Johansson said, plane disappears at the end. The truth is, we don't know what the F happened to him. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sure. Well, listen, I want to thank you very much for giving us your time and some excellent research and dropping all of this information that most people have not heard before. I'm glad that we get the exclusive on it. And I hope that we can twist your arm and get you to come back again.
No worries.
If V has her way, you're going to be here 3 nights a week, just so you know.
Okay.
So I'm going to throw you out of here and do a quick wrap up. I appreciate your time, and I can't thank you enough for doing this. Thank you, Victor.
Okay, bye.
All right. Wow, friends, what a great conversation. And I got to tell you, this has been on my list of things to do for a while because I want to know some of these things that he's sharing that most people have not heard of. Yeah. I got to tell you, friends, I'm always happy when there's an audience. I want to definitely thank you for coming here tonight and being a part of mine. I'm always happy when there's an audience. And thanks to the Super Chat donators tonight. Thank you to the Patreon supporters. You make this show possible. Until next time, friends, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night, and God bless all.
Truthseekers is a viewer-supported show. Wonderful people like you who enjoy this show send pledges in the form of super chats, super stickers, super thanks, PayPal, or Cash App. Instructions for how to help are in the description. You can also join our Patreon, and for as little as $1 a month you can get extra content. Patreon supporters get a backstage pass, early access to all our production videos before they are distributed publicly, Stephen Cambion's music, private writings, a monthly show journal, and more. You can also become a YouTube channel member for $5 a month. A YouTube membership includes all of the Patreon benefits, plus a special members badge, priority reply to video comments, and the live chat, plus a monthly members-only video. We thank you all, kind and generous benefactors, for supporting Truthseekers. Thank you for your generosity and support. Truthseekers is a viewer-supported show. Now there's a great way to support these broadcasts and show your support. Please be sure and check out our merchandise store. Links to our 2 merchandise online stores are in the links to this video or podcast. The Amazon storefront ships super quickly in the United States, Great Britain, and in many more places. Amazon may not ship to your country or location. If that's the case, hit our second merchandise link in the description and visit our Redbubble storefront. Merchandise from our Redbubble storefront ships worldwide, but may take longer than Amazon. We've got a great deal of super high quality merchandise for you to choose from, including t-shirts, phone cases, sweatshirts, and even pillows. The feedback from our products have been overwhelmingly great. Quality products and fast shipping. People all over the world are buying some merchandise and showing their support of the show. Praise the cash! Praise the cash! Praise the cash! We thank you all, kind and generous benefactors, who are buying some merchandise and helping us to continue this journey. Thanks for being here. This is Truthseekers with your host, Stephen Cambion. Please rate, like and comment on our videos or podcasts. If you are listening to an audio podcast, please rate us 5 stars to help us rise in the search rankings. If you are watching on YouTube, please like, comment and subscribe to our channel. If you're listening to an audio podcast, we love and appreciate you listeners, but you are missing the live tapings. All our shows are recorded live with video feed. We'd love you to come be a part of our live broadcasts and tapings for the podcast. Head on over to YouTube, click the search tool, the little magnifying glass, put Truthseekers, one word in the search bar, and hit enter. You'll see a strange and mysterious guy with sunglasses. That means you found the channel. Go there, smash the subscribe button and hit the notification bell to receive up-to-date info on our YouTube channel. We welcome you to be a part of our live taping and our chat room during the live broadcasts. Seek the truth. Speak the truth. This is Truthseekers. Truthseekers.